In recent years, Clash of Clans has found itself in a bit of controversy here and there, from the removal of beloved features to decisions that would terribly backfire. And though not on the same level as Clash Royale, for example, if you look hard enough, every year in Clash history had something going on. For example, in 2012, the hottest topic of the century was this new mobile game that was outlandishly pay to win. Clash of Clans. I'm not even kidding. They had no idea how good they had it back then. Now, this was pretty typical for 2012 controversies because at the time, the freemium model wasn't very prevalent. People didn't like the fact that Clash of Clans was designed to get you to spend money, especially how the end goal of the game, trophy pushing, was pay to win. You wouldn't crack the top 50 or top anything unless you spent boatloads of money on gemming your upgrades and training time. And for a lot of players, this didn't sit well because money provided an unfair advantage. Clash of Clans was pay to win. No, it wasn't, but yeah, it's called the controversy for a reason because not everyone was on the same page. The vast majority of players didn't care about the leaderboards and just played Clash while taking a dump. Now in 2013, aside from the usual pay to win shenanigans that continued on, it was a pretty solid year, and honestly I had a hard time finding anything for 2013, which I guess is a good thing. The only thing that was mildly controversial, at least for a small portion of the player base, was the enforcement of personal breaks in May 2013. This would essentially kick players out for playing too long. Imagine encountering that issue. This was primarily to prevent leaderboard players from being on 24/7 and never being attacked. It was unfair for the leaderboards, but it also made revenges even more impossible than today. However, some players complained that this was SuperCell trying to control the amount of time they play, and they didn't like that they had to log off. However, the majority of players were not playing Clash of Clans for hours at a time, so it wasn't that big of a deal. Now that we're past 2012 and 2013 though, it's time to get to the real controversies. 2014 had the biggest controversy up to this point, Heroes version 2.0. This is what the developers were calling a massive rework. And if you know anything about SuperCell and 2.0, it never goes well. This rework drastically changed the Heroes game mechanics. I could make an entire video of these changes, but to sum it up, Heroes now had better abilities and they were smarter, but they were significantly weaker. These were some of the graphs posted on Reddit of their stats before and after the changes. As you can see, at higher levels, their damage and HP takes a nosedive. It's not even comparable. The only exception to this was the Archer Queen's Royal Cloak, which now did more damage than before. But look at the other graphs, man. People were not happy. Many thought that these changes weren't very cash money. Literally, because some players spent a ton of money upgrading these heroes only to have their stats basically cut in half. The ultimate bamboozle. So this started a wave of refunds where players would submit a refund request to their app stores stating that Clash of Clans had changed so much to the point where they felt they were scammed out of their money. And yes, players did get their money back, and this had no effect on their account or progress because at the time, negative gems didn't exist. You just got your money back and no ban or anything. You got off scot-free. Now these changes were obviously for the better. It made heroes more hero-like and not just something that brainlessly hit stuff and would get lured out with the clan castle. For both the player and primarily SuperCell, it was a small price to pay for a big reward. A similar thing happened in 2015 where drastic changes made many players quit. The shield changes. Yeah, I'm sure many of you have heard this far too many times, but it was undoubtedly the most controversial thing of 2015. And just in case you don't want to hear it again, I did provide chapters. You don't gotta thank me, just use Code Havoc. I'm just kidding, but basically, prior to this update, it was a common farming strategy for players to leave their town hall outside because other players would attack them and only take the town hall most of the time for trophies. The attacker got free trophies and the defender got a free 12-hour shield. What was there not to love? However, the December 2015 update made it so that if you left your town hall outside, you would no longer get a shield unless 30% of your base was destroyed as well. Not to mention that the town hall now held a pretty significant amount of loot, so leaving it out was probably the dumbest thing you could do now. The update essentially forced you to put the town hall inside the base, how it was intended since the game came out. But many players weren't on board. They didn't like that SuperCell was basically telling them that the way they were playing the game for the past 3 years was totally wrong, and this is how it's going to work from now on. And not surprisingly, this backfired tremendously. A lot of players were quitting the game, selling their account, getting refunds. It was a whole mess. But like some things on this video, these changes were for the better. The old way of farming was lazy and lessened the need for basic skills like designing a good base, you know, to protect your loot. It was like playing Clash of Clans in easy mode, and it didn't push anyone to get creative. Now we're at 2016, a pretty slow year for Clash of Clans, but overall, not terrible. In April of that year, they committed to making the game fair, and this included going after those who were using third-party softwares like iMod and Xmod to do things in the game that normally weren't possible. Now, because these softwares were ridiculously popular, what they were about to do was going to affect millions of players, which is why I believe was the biggest controversy of 2016. Permanent bans. So SuperCell was handing them out like free candy at Halloween. Everyone from those who used third-party softwares the day before to, for a couple of minutes 2 years ago, all of them were banned. And these ban waves happened several times throughout 2016 as SuperCell was perfecting the art of detecting these mods, and they were going crazy with it. The most controversial part of it all, though, had to be that some players felt that the permanent ban for something they did months or years ago was too harsh. All of their years of progress and the money they spent into it was gone in an instant. And if you were banned on one account, it's likely that all of your other accounts were banned as well, including other games like Heyday. Now, my farm. On one side, players were asking for a second chance. There was even a petition for this. But on the other, they were like, no way, if you hadn't violated the terms of service, it would have never happened. There was a division in the community on whether if SuperCell had gone too far or did exactly what was needed. I will say one thing though, after 2016, these softwares disappeared, and not because they weren't available anymore, but because players were afraid of getting banned. 2017, not a bad year, kind of boring, but I'm not here to rank all the years. I already made a video on that. There wasn't much going on in 2017. I mean, the clock tower nerf was pretty controversial, you know, because they basically nerfed progression in half in the builder base. But I believe players were much more upset and divided on the Inferno Tower nerf. In December of that year, there was some huge balance changes that essentially buffed offense and nerfed defense. For example, the Golem, Level Hound, and Giant all got HP increases, and heroes got more levels. Meanwhile, defenses like the Inferno Tower and Expo were nerfed. The worst of it all was the Inferno Tower's ability to block healing, one of its distinctive features ever since it was added, was straight up removed. Players were upset because they thought these changes were too drastic, that the game was about to become too easy, and that anyone will be able to 3-star anything with 0 skill. Some went even as far as saying that this would kill the game because competitiveness was at the core of Clash of Clans. And they were kind of right about the being too easy part. After these changes, 3-starring was significantly easier. But man, wait till they find out how easy Clash is today. But yeah, it was pretty controversial because others really liked this change because it made Clash of Clans more casual and, you know, fun. But even to this day, there is that debate on whether if Clash of Clans should be hard or easy. Moving on to 2018, the year of Town Hall 12 and Clan War Leagues. Also the year of adding highly requested features for gems, but that wasn't as controversial as the removal of engineering. Engineering was basically a strategy where you would not build certain defenses so that your war weight was as low as possible. The bottom of a certain clan was usually filled with these engineer bases, and the top was full of max players. But because these engineer bases lowered the war weight of the clan overall, they would get matched up with an easy clan because it all screwed up with the matchmaking. Yes, this was basically cheating no matter what they called it, engineering, 0.5. They never designed the Clan Wars matchmaking to be abused in such a way. So for a while, engineering as a whole was a big old controversy. In fact, the clan with the highest war win streak at the time got there because of engineering. SuperCell tried to fix it through matchmaking changes in 2017, but it wasn't that effective. So in June 2018, they made a single change that essentially killed engineering. In order to move on to the next town hall, you were now required to build all available buildings before moving on to the next. Oh, and this also meant that if you wanted to play with the brand new Town Hall 12 that just came out, they'd have to build several buildings and ruin their engineered base. Now, I personally never cared about competitive play, and anything that makes the game more fair I see as a win. However, many players didn't see it that way at the time, as many had built accounts around this strategy and were upset that once again, SuperCell was forcing them to play a certain way. Every time SuperCell did something like this throughout the game's history, it was controversial, no matter if the changes were for the better. 2019 had to be one of the easiest ones on this list because nothing was more controversial than the removal of global chat. So much that to this day, people are still asking for them to add it back. What made global chat so awesome was not only could you talk to random people half across the globe, but it was also the perfect place to recruit players for your clan, and also to find a clan. A lot of old school players found their homes through global chat or built entire clans out of it. However, global was also home to some not so great activities. I mean, remember those teenage girls that were actually 60-year-old men? Yeah, this chat was home to all sorts of stuff. And over the years, there were stories and reports of something happening in global, and eventually the potato was too hot, so SuperCell had to drop it. Many players miss global for different reasons. Perhaps it's nostalgia or just that raw human interaction, but it was mostly controversial because we lost the best form of recruitment in the game. They tried to fill this gap with the recruitment tool and notice board, but nothing ever satisfied players as much as global did, and to this day, developers are still trying to find a better solution. So 2020 was actually a very good year. I mean, it might not have the best updates, but as far as controversies, there weren't really any. There was some content creator drama, but honestly, no one cares about that. I'm not gonna waste your time. But because I am doing every year, I will say that some players weren't a big fan of the new age verification feature. Not only could these new young accounts not use SuperCell ID at the time, but any clan they joined would have a strict chat filter put in place, and the clan wouldn't know who that was, and it was annoying for some clans. They were stuck with these horrendous filters. However, this age verification didn't affect existing players, at least at the time, and the issues I just mentioned weren't that big of a deal. I don't know if I would call that a controversy, but yeah, that was about it. Now we're at 2021, the year of Town Hall 14, and many changes, but one of those changes wasn't received too well. It had to do with the terms of service. Who reads those? I don't know. This kind of went under the radar for that reason because a lot of players don't even read or care about the terms of service, but there was a vocal minority trying to make people aware of these changes. Basically, they made it so that no one can file a class action lawsuit and that anyone now has to file disputes with SuperCell directly, and they will arbitrate with a third-party arbitrator. Now, I'm not going to pretend I fully comprehend all that, but essentially, these changes stripped US and Canadian players of their legal rights, making it very difficult to legally go after SuperCell. Ironically, they were sued a couple months later by a company named Gree for copyright infringement. Totally unrelated and not at all the same, but I thought that was hilarious timing. Now, most players still didn't care after whatever they changed, and I'm gonna be real, I don't either. It's just a game, man. What are you gonna sue Clash of Clans for? Wasting your time? But in all seriousness, I do understand why there was a bit of uproar about these changes. 2022, the year of Clan Capital and the hardest meta in recent years, thanks to Town Hall 15. You know what else was hard? Having to let go of flags. In June 2022, June seems to be the month where they add a lot of controversial stuff. I'm just saying, I just noticed, but yeah. Anyway, that month, they announced that they'd be removing all national flags. They explained that the reasoning behind this was to keep the Clash universe separate from real-life references. Now, that statement alone was controversial by itself because it was just kind of like, what does that even mean? Ever since they said that, there has been many real-life references in Clash. It's like they did the opposite of what they said. Though they never officially stated it, it was more likely that they got rid of them due to the political climate at the time. Still, it didn't make sense to a lot of players. They're just flags. How offensive could they be, you know? But yeah, I guess that argument could go both ways. They're just flags. In 2023, there was more than one controversy that we can discuss, like the raid medal shop changes and the gold pass price increase. But the biggest had to be hero equipment and the whole economy that came with that. The main argument being that this new system would overcomplicate things and that it required way too much grinding compared to before. And these were valid concerns. Now you had to upgrade the hero and its two abilities separately, and the ores required for the equipment was incredibly scarce. If you didn't want to fall behind, it felt that you had to play a whole lot more than before, and with new equipment releases, it just made things worse. There were also concerns that this would ruin the game's balancing and that it would never be the same, that it introduced a new level of FOMO to the game, and pay-to-win mechanics. However, despite the controversial nature of this update, I believe most players were happy with these changes. It was something that many had been looking forward to for years, and even though there were some issues SuperCell had to iron out, overall I think this was one of the best updates, if not the best, of 2023. Now we're at 2024, another year with several controversies. The removal of skins from the past, content creator drama, the Goblin Builder, and the whole helpers feature, but I believe the most controversial had to be the removal of the Eagle Artillery. The community was so divided on this that it felt like the only right choice here. The main argument was that the Eagle Artillery was not being merged, it was being removed, that the Town Hall 17 weapon was nothing like the Eagle Artillery, and that merging the two buildings would be a significant downgrade. What made matters worse is that players actually liked the Eagle Artillery, a sort of attachment to it. I'm not sure exactly what it was, but the removal of it didn't sit well with a lot of players. There were also concerns that SuperCell was catering too hard to the casual player, and that Town Hall 17 was about to have absolutely no strategy. There were some players even boycotting Town Hall 17 by simply not upgrading it. On the other hand, many players didn't care, stating that this change was necessary to bring Clash of Clans to a new era, and that players were grossly overestimating how effective the Eagle Artillery even was at higher town halls. The storm did eventually calm. It's not really brought up a lot these days, but it certainly was the most controversial change of 2024. There were tons of different opinions being tossed around. And finally, we're at 2025, the current year. It's been a pretty solid year in my opinion, and I've been enjoying the feature we're about to talk about. So far, it's the most controversial thing of 2025. Crafted defenses. It's not what or how OP the defenses are, it's the limited time nature of it all. As you know, crafted defenses are only temporary for a season of a quarter of the year, and this is the most controversial part. On one side, you have players that love these changes because not only does it give max players something to do, but it also adds more of that strategic complexity that the game desperately needed so that not every base is the same, you know? But on the other hand, players hate that casuals will never get to fully max anymore because we're gonna have these defenses with crazy amount of levels that reset 4 times a year. And you know, there's a whole pay-to-win argument as well. Both sides have valid points. I personally don't really care like a lot of things. I just play the game and whatever they add, I try to like. Most of the time. Don't look at that playlist. But I can see why it's been so controversial. As someone that hasn't spent a dime on the game for months already, it does feel like I'll never max it out before it resets. But yeah, those were the most controversial things every year in Clash of Clans history. As you can see, some of these weren't really that big of a deal. I guess we're just fortunate to be playing a game that is okay most of the time. It's certainly not as controversial as Clash Royale and whatever they have going on over there. But yeah, I hope you guys enjoyed. Let me know what you think in the comments down below. Before you go though, YouTube thinks you'll like this next video, so check it out. As always, see you guys in the next one. Peace!